Hey there, it's Leslie with Leslie's Cookies and Treats, and lately I've just been all about royal icing transfer sheets. And so today I'm making a variety of flowers. I'm going to call them all daisies, but in reality, some will be sunflowers, some will be just six-petal flowers, and I'm going to show you how I did them. And if you want to make these along with me, the transfer sheet is available at my website at www.l-treats.com. So for these first few daisies, I put down 5 dots of some stiffer royal icing consistency. It's maybe a little stiffer than a detail consistency, and then I'm just going to use my scribe to pull the icing into the center and put a red dot for the middle. And then now here I'm doing the same thing, but with a looser consistency icing, so there's not as much texture for the petals on those. And I'll go ahead and add my red dot in the center using a wet on wet technique. And I'm just going to repeat that here, but leave it white for a dot to be added at some date in the future when I am using it on a set so that the dot in the center will match. And now I'm moving on to the bigger daisies. I'm just going to outline them, let the outline sit a little bit and do a couple with the red icing. And then I'll go back in and fill those in. I let the outline sit because this is a looser consistency icing, and I didn't want the center of the flower to be completely obliterated, and I also wanted the petals to retain their shape. And I'll do the same thing with the red now and flood that in, and I'll use my scribe to settle the icing down. And I have a cookie set coming up where I'm going to be using red and white flowers, so that's why I'm doing most of these with red and white. But you can do them in any color of your choice. And for fun, I decided to add some little stitches to the outside of this one. And then I had added the red center to the white flowers. And for these little itty bitty daisies, I'm using my stiffer white consistency icing and just making little lines for the petals and then smoothing out the center with my scribe so it's not raised higher than the transfer. And sometimes it's helpful if you turn your transfer sheet as you're piping these petals. And then for these other little daisies over here, I'm only going to do a half daisy, and then I'll do more petals going up over the bottom after I pipe the center later on and after the icing has had a chance to set up. Moving on to these bigger daisies, I decided to make these pink, and I just outlined and flooded in the outside, leaving the center empty for now. I'll let the icing set up before I go back in and fill that in. And I'm just made another one over here with yellow. And my yellow icing is a bit stiffer, so I need to settle it down with my scribe a bit more. And now I'm going to use my stiff yellow icing to make some sunflowers. So I'm just going to pipe a big ball at the top and then stop squeezing and drag it in towards the center, going all the way around the flower. Again, it might be helpful to turn your flower as you go so that it's easier to make a ball of icing and drag it towards the center. It's easier to pull the icing towards you rather than push it away like I was doing at those bottom petals. And here I'll use my stiff icing to make a half sunflower. So again, squeeze a ball of icing and then drag it towards the center. Squeeze a ball of icing, stop squeezing, and drag it towards the center. And then we'll let that set up while we go back to these little 6-petal flowers. I'm using some purple icing. It's a little bit stiffer, and I'm just making 6 dots and then using my scribe to drag the icing towards the middle. And because I'm using a stiffer consistency icing, my scribe will leave little lines in the petals as I drag them towards the center, which adds an interesting texture to the flower. And then I'm just going to go back in and add a white center. And I'm going to do the same thing over here with my white icing, but it's not a thick consistency, so it will all just blend together. And I'm doing the same thing, piping a ball of icing at the outside edge of the petal, stop squeezing, and dragging it towards the middle. And my little daisies have had time to set up, so I'm going to use my stiffer yellow icing to make little dots in the center. And I'm going to do that for all of these little daisies, including the little half daisies. I'll just put some dots at the bottom over here, and then we'll let that set up, and I'll come back in and pipe some more white petals going up over the center of the daisy. And this pink flower has had time to set up, so I'm going to add a white center to this and the yellow flower. And my sunflower has also had a chance to set up, so I'm going to go back in and add a second row of petals using the same technique with my stiffer yellow icing. I'll pipe a ball and then stop squeezing and drag it towards the center, and then use my scribe to settle the icing down in the middle. And I'll do the same thing with this half sunflower over here, pipe a ball, stop squeezing, and drag it towards the center. And then I decided to make an orange 6-petal flower over here. So I'm just going to do that. And I'm just using all of my leftover icing that's left over from a project I recently did. And so this is a good way to use your leftover icing and you can store these flowers in an airtight container for practically forever. And then you will always have flowers on hand for your next project. And then for these larger flowers, I just went ahead and outlined and flooded it in with my flood consistency white icing. I used my scribe to settle it down. And instead of putting a dot in the center of this one, I went ahead and just gave it a little swirl. And as you can see, there's so many different things you can do. You can add stitches to the outside. You can add polka dots. You can do all different colors. You can let them dry. You can leave them solid and let the centers stay undone until you're ready to put them on the cookie so that you can add that later so it matches your design. There's just so many things you can do with royal icing transfers. And I'm going to make a starburst pattern for the center here, so I'm just using my scribe to drag white icing out into each of the petals, and I'm cleaning my scribe between each time so it doesn't drag pink icing back into the white. And then I'll just poke up and down at the ends to settle it down. This might be really cute if you did it more like a hibiscus flower, and after it dried you went back with some yellow icing and added a pistil to the center. So now going back to my yellow flowers, I have some brown royal icing and I'm just going to make some dots so it looks more like a sunflower. And I'll let those dots set up before I go back in and add a second row of dots like I just did with those daisies. And then let's flood in this last 6-petal flower with white icing. I'll smooth it out with my scribe and then I'm just going to put a ring of dots around the center. And then going back with my stiffer white icing, I'm going to squeeze a ball and then drag it towards the center for all of these remaining daisies. You can't really see it here in the video because white icing is so reflective, but by using the stiffer icing, it does create some texture as you're squeezing the ball and dragging it into the center. And I really like that textured look for these little daisies. And then I'll smooth out the center with my scribe and add a yellow bead so these look more like traditional daisies. And then the brown dots in the center of my sunflowers have had a chance to crust over, so I'm just going to add another row of dots. Then I'm going to grab my stiff white icing and just make a big bead of icing over the top of the center of these flowers and drag it down towards the bottom so it looks like that daisy is folded over. And I'll use my paintbrush to kind of just push that all underneath so that the flower looks complete. And let's do that again. So taking my stiff white icing, I'm just going to make a bead of icing at the top of the center of the flower and then squeeze and stop squeezing and drag that down so that it has little petals at the bottom. And then tucking any tails of that icing back underneath the flower. And then I also want to add texture to the center of my other yellow daisies, so my yellow icing has had a chance to crust over, so I'm just going to use my paintbrush to dab up and down at it to kind of dimple the centers of these flowers. And then moving down to the big daisies at the bottom of the page, I'm still using my stiffer white icing, but I'm just filling in all of these petals, and then I'll use my scribe to settle the icing down. And then add another red dot for the center because I have a set coming up where I need red and white daisies. And moving back up to the sunflower, I'm just going to make another dot with my yellow icing and drag it down towards the bottom. And then I will actually go back and add another row of those once that's set up a little bit. And if your icing is not stiff enough to keep the petals separate, you can go ahead with your icing that's a thinner consistency and pipe alternating petals and then let that set up and then go back later and pipe in the rest of those petals. And then moving back up to my sunflower, I'll add one more row of petals here at the bottom and then tuck everything underneath. And then let's add the next row of pink icing here on these, and then we'll let that set up again before adding the center. And then all of these flowers are done. Get creative. You can do them any way you like. Use all your leftover icing colors. Get creative with it. Have fun. Play. And once you've finished, set it aside to dry completely. I let mine dry overnight. Now I'm going to go back with a little bit of brown and yellow petal dust. I'm using colors from the Sugar Art, and I'll leave a link in the description. And I'm just going to dab at the edges of these sunflowers and give them a little bit more definition for these petals. And you can use edible markers and anything you want to further decorate these flowers before you put them on your cookie with a dab of royal icing on the back. So once they've completely dried and you're done decorating them with edible markers and edible dusts, you can just peel them off your parchment sheet or your sheet protector, and then you can put them in an airtight container to save forever, and they'll always be ready when you need a flower. Royal icing transfers are so great to have on hand, so I hope that you found this useful, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you.